It allows police, military, digital forensics investigators to actually take that drone that they've recovered after the incident and then pull all the data off that drone, extract that data, and then link up that data with all of our over-the-air tracking, with all of our, larger scale network data, close the loop and prove that, hey, this drone with this person, they're the one that was responsible for that incident that we tracked beforehand.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 402. What is the role of drone forensics in protecting against drone incursions? For that question, we head to San Diego to speak with Grant Jordan, CEO at SkySafe, a leader in cloud-based drone defense and airspace awareness solutions. Founded in 2015, SkySafe provides advanced technology to protect people and places against drone threats. The company's technology allows governments, law enforcement, airports, corporations, cities, and more to manage their airspace with drone data and analytics. SkySafe applies advanced radio technology, reverse engineering, and deep threat analysis to develop tools to safely and effectively operate authorized drones while protecting against threats to airspace security. The company has also evolved into a leader in the drone forensic space. By performing deep data extraction on downed or recovered drones, SkySafe's forensic technology allows investigators to match metadata with flight logs, serial numbers, and other unique identifiers. This process ensures that experts are able to decisively conclude that a drone they have in their possession is the same drone that was detected acting maliciously or illegally while it was in the air. After graduating from MIT, Grant served as an officer in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years. At the Air Force Research Lab, he designed and built hardware systems for counter-IED missions and small UAVs, specializing in rapid product development for Special Forces units. Grant has spoken at numerous conferences, including DEF CON and the Commercial UAV Expo. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Grant talks about SkySafe, the company's counter-drone and forensic services, and the role that drone forensics have in an integrated counter-drone solution. But before we hear from Grant, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And as a reminder, starting June 20th, the Drone Radio Show podcast and myself will be taking the summer off from doing new interviews. I'll be working on some things behind the scenes, doing some traveling, and retooling the podcast for the future. Look for new episodes in September. So let's learn about the role of drone forensics with Grant Jordan of SkySafe. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Grant to introduce himself.
I'm Grant Jordan. I'm the CEO of SkySafe and one of the co-founders. We're a counter-drone company, or more specifically, a drone tracking and forensics company. We've been around for a little over 7 years now. We started out primarily in the military space, and since then, the use cases and the threats of drones have really evolved and cut across all kinds of areas of public safety and commercial drone use.
Grant, can you tell us about SkySafe's approach to counter-drone solutions?
We work the counter-drone problem from a number of different directions. We started on the military side. Much of the background of myself and our team comes from the military and defense space in general. I was formerly an Air Force officer working in the Air Force Research Lab. So I saw kind of pretty early on from the military side, from the DoD side, how the availability and spread of small, affordable, highly capable drones can really cause all sorts of mayhem. So our first customers were US DoD. So we were providing what you would kind of think of as more of tactical systems, the kinds of things you would on the military side mount onto a tactical vehicle, be able to show the operator drone threats that are in the area, alert them to that, and then allow them to try to do something about that. In most cases, jamming the drones, breaking their control links, that kind of thing. But I think since then, the real big sort of transition in the space has been focusing less on the defense side and more on the more domestic and commercial side of thinking about all sorts of places within the US that really need to be thinking about drone threats and monitoring that airspace. So that's things like prisons, stadiums, airports, border protection, all of these kinds of areas where it's critical to think about not just how do you stop the bad drones, but also how do you tell the difference between the bad drones and the good drones? How do you tell when someone's actually authorized to be in the area? I think that's kind of one of the critical things. And to me, that's sort of what takes it from what we would traditionally think of as counter drone to something more akin to airspace management as a whole. It's much bigger than just kind of stopping drones. It's really about managing the airspace and enabling commercial drone use.
When you talk about managing the airspace through the services that you provide, is that similar to the unmanned traffic management system that the FAA, NASA, and others have been pursuing?
What we're really doing and how I kind of think about airspace management, it's really we're building the foundation to be one of the major data providers into that eventual UTM, into that eventual UAV traffic management network. I think to have a fully functional, nationwide UTM system, it requires a lot of different parties. It requires a lot of different people involved providing different capabilities. So, that's all the different data providers like SkySafe providing information into that network about where the drones are, what they're doing, potentially whose drones they are to deconflict stuff. And then from the other side, you've got all the drone service providers. That's, all of your commercial drone entities doing your package delivery, inspection, all that kind of stuff. And it's about really, working together to build a network so that everyone can coordinate their use of the airspace together. Now, I think the big thing is that vision is still a little ways away, right? There isn't a singular UTM network right now for people to plug into. There's kind of a number of different initiatives there. But really, we're able to lay the foundation for that future UTM network by trying to solve the actual problems that people are worried about right now, in the kind of narrower context of, drones that are potentially interfering with stuff, whether that's, airports or prisons or what have you.
What type of clients are using SkySafe?
Like I said, we started in that kind of tactical direction in, providing the individual system, the individual piece of hardware to that customer, whether that's military or law enforcement or whatever. Now, thinking into that longer term vision toward UTM, for us, it's about building out kind of city scale sensor networks, really being able to track drone activity across entire cities, across multiple cities, all across the country, then being able to provide that data as a service to the different people that need it. That's kind of the big shift. So, right now we work with quite a few airports and prisons and kind of departments of corrections. I think those are, for us, airports and prisons are two of the big areas where those are areas where they're seeing the problems, right? They are having actual problems on a, potentially, daily or weekly basis, and they know they have to do something about it. So, trying to address those problems today, that's kind of what gets us to that longer term sort of managing that network.
Using an airport as an example, is there a lot of hardware or infrastructure that would need to be installed to get the facility online?
It depends. I think the big difference in the way we operate is that we basically build out coverage areas. So we try to not require the customer to really think about or worry about the hardware aspect. I think that's one of the big things from the customer side is that, if you're talking about an airport or prison or a stadium, fundamentally the problem they're trying to solve isn't about the drones themselves. They don't really want to become drone experts. They don't want to become RF experts. Their job is not to figure out where to place an antenna. Their job is to manage the safety and security of their facility. So that's the problem they want to solve. So it's the kind of situation where the more that we can take care of kind of the mechanics of how stuff works, the better. So we basically build out these coverage areas. We deploy our sensors, across a city to be able to have that coverage for that airport or that stadium or that prison ahead of time. So that really, it's literally just a matter of subscribing to the service, being able to provide that service directly and not have to then kind of get into the weeds of, where do we need to, place this sensor? How do we need to do those things?
Putting my city planner hat on, have there been any issues with having to get a local permit or approval for the location of a sensor or an antenna?
In some ways, we're operating similarly to how cell network providers operate. We get communication site leases, we deploy our systems there. The one nice thing in this case is that we're talking about systems that are purely passive in most cases. So, we're not having to get the same level of licensing and approvals that a cell tower would.
Is there a standard that SkySafe and other air management companies follow, to ensure everything works together seamlessly as things grow?
It's definitely not been solved. There's no common standard yet for how everybody's going to plug all of this in and integrate all of the data from the different types of providers. But I think that's definitely coming. And it's definitely something that we have to do. That's something that needs to be figured out to be able to make sure that everyone's able to share data in that same way and plug into a larger network. Because, I think that's the thing that we're seeing across the industry, right? Is that having individual systems and individual locations and not kind of sharing that data just really isn't helpful. And that's not kind of the long-term solution.
When you set up a system, do you need the active participation of, say, like Amazon or other service providers?
We don't have to have any sort of, cooperation or partnership with any of the drone service providers themselves, though that certainly can help. And in the long term, that's sort of the goal, right? Is to actually be cooperating so that whether you're talking about SkySafe as the airspace management system or the UTM system, or you're talking about anyone else, I think the goal is to have all of those commercial drone providers be feeding the data into these systems to know where those commercial drones are and to know that, hey, this particular drone, it's being operated by Amazon or whoever, and, it's actually authorized to be in that area. They're actually following the rules. I think that's one of the critical pieces for these different types of customers and users as well. Like, especially when you're talking about something like, an airport or a stadium, knowing that the drone that's there is actually meant to be there and you've kind of pre-cleared it, put it on a list of allowed drones, and it can show up like that in any of these systems. I think that's pretty critical. And I think for us, it's kind of funny to me. I think that a lot of people, they hear about SkySafe or they hear about companies like us that are sort of in the counter drone business, and they think that that means we're anti-drone, that we're against drones. And I think it's the exact opposite. It's, we're all in this business and we all do the work that we do because we're genuinely excited about drones and we want them to be used for these good things. We want all of the awesome stuff we can do with drones. But the thing is, to get there, we've got to have rules of the road and we've got to have enforcement tools to be able to actually, have drones used for good and make sure that you're not spending time with law enforcement or security or whoever, like going over and, basically having to harass pilots that are actually following the rules. A lot of people in the industry talk about the potential to have sort of trusted operator programs, kind of like you have with, like TSA PreCheck and, various customs programs and stuff where, if people are following the rules and they're getting approvals and everything, you should be able to know that ahead of time and, basically be able to filter out any of those, good cooperating folks and not waste any cycles worrying about them.
I'd like to talk about the challenge with drones flying into and over prisons. But first of all, can you talk about the magnitude of the problem?
Yeah, well, there's a few problems in that space, and they're kind of overlapping. I mean, number one, you're right that we've seen a massive uptick in the use of drones for smuggling of all sorts, whether that's into prisons or over national borders. Clearly, the folks whose job it is to try to smuggle contraband into various areas, they're not dumb. They're seeing technology and they're utilizing it to the best of their ability. So it's definitely been a rising threat, and I think the challenge for whether it's departments of corrections or whoever is, number one, it's a hard problem. And it's a totally new problem to them. And when you think about kind of physical security of a high security facility of whatever type, drones really kind of break a lot of the basic assumptions that you generally have about how you build secure perimeters and how you build secure facilities. Suddenly A 5-foot fence is no different than a 20-foot fence. It doesn't really matter. Somebody can just fly a drone over. And the space requires a lot of unique expertise in understanding all the different drone threats and all the different technologies that can be used against them, whether you're talking about RF tracking systems or radar or cameras or what have you. It's a very complex and difficult space. Our primary focus is in building RF systems, but I really see a lot of our purpose is in really being the subject matter experts in the entire space, in both the problems and in all the technologies out there. So if we're working with a customer, like I want to be their trusted expert, I want to be their partner. And if the exact situation they're looking at, if RF systems that we build and RF technology that we create isn't the solution for that, then that's fine. Like I want to tell them what the right solution is. I want to tell them, who the best other companies in the industry are for making those different technologies and deploying those. Because as lots of people like to say, there's no silver bullet. There's no one technology that magically solves all these problems for you. I wish there was, because then I would sell that technology and it would be great. But it's a really hard problem, and we saw that on the military side, and we're seeing that on the more civil side right now.
With today's technology, we can effectively detect when a drone approaches a prison. But current regulations still limit what can be done to stop it, right?
That's a good point, too. I think there's kind of two separate halves of the problem that folks have to deal with. I mean, one is obviously doing the detection piece, doing the tracking piece, being able to give the situational awareness of what's going on and the fact that there's a drone crossing into that area right now and alert the proper people that need to respond to it. That's kind of the first half. The second half is really the question of what do you do about it? And, I think, first of all, what you're kind of hinting at there, from a regulatory perspective, right now, state and local law enforcement don't have any legal authority to actually do anything against a drone that's in the air. They essentially can't touch a drone in the air. Now, federal law enforcement does under DOJ or DHS, but that's kind of a different story. So I think in the long term, I think everybody in the industry and on Capitol Hill realizes that they need that authority. They need that kind of roll down authority to state and local to, give them the authority to actually respond and do something about it. But the other thing I would say on that is that part of that response piece isn't about the drone itself, because the problem isn't necessarily the drone. The problem is the human that's behind that drone. The problem is the actual intent that that person has. Because I think that's something that gets lost in a lot of these conversations, is that the drone itself is not what we're worried about. We're worried about what a person is trying to do with that drone. So in reality, the real response, the actual response that is the only response that's going to, solve the situation, is being able to actually deal with the human that's behind that drone, finding that person, confronting them, arresting them, confiscating the drone, kind of taking whatever action. Just knocking a drone out of the sky doesn't actually solve the problem of, what that person is trying to do and why. That's why we focus a lot of our efforts on, not just being able to provide the location of the drone in real time, but also the location of the operator. And that's also why when you look at the rules around like remote ID, that the FAA has passed that all of the drone operators need to follow. It's not just about broadcasting the location of the drone and the serial number of the drone. It's also about broadcasting the location of the pilot, because in the end, the pilot is the one that's really responsible for what's going on, and they need to be able to be held accountable.
Will bad actors be able to hide or shield their location from the system?
Well, they're certainly going to try to. That's for sure. And obviously, people that are trying to use drones for nefarious purposes, they're not going to be following the law. They're not going to be trying to follow all the rules of remote ID. And that really is the place that SkySafe fills. We can and are, providing kind of the ground station infrastructure to be receiving all of the good remote ID broadcasts, being able to provide that information into that future UTM network. But in addition to that, using that to also analyze the drones that are explicitly not broadcasting remote ID or are potentially trying to, obfuscate their location or hide signals in various ways, because that's kind of the other piece of it. Because it is at some level, it is voluntary when you think about things like remote ID. There's no kind of perfect way to enforce that.
Once law enforcement apprehends the operator whose drone is violating the airspace, does the data that SkySafe has collected become part of the evidence?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a big piece of this, is being able to have the data and the records to actually prosecute someone who's going and breaking the law. That's kind of the other piece of this. And that feeds right into, you mentioned earlier, we're one of the only teams in this space that works on the forensics piece. We're the largest provider of drone forensic extraction capabilities in the world. Our tech on the forensic side is used by law enforcement and military in 35 countries. So we're all over the place in that space. So we provide a tool to law enforcement called CFID. It's built by our partner, SCG Canada. They're a company in the digital forensic space. So we provide all the drone extraction capabilities on that tool. Basically what that provides is it closes the loop after a situation like that, where with that tool, with the CFID tool, it allows those, police, military, digital forensics investigators to actually take that drone that they've recovered after the incident and then pull all the data off that drone, extract that data, and then link up that data recovered from the physical drone, link up that data with all of our over-the-air tracking, with all of our, larger scale network data to really be able to close the loop and prove that, hey, this drone with this person, they're the one that was responsible for that incident that we tracked, beforehand. So, making sure that you can really kind of complete that whole cycle. When I think about kind of the solutions that SkySafe provides, I kind of think about it as three buckets. The first one is the real-time incident response piece. That's, being able to tell the corrections officers of that prison, like, hey, there's a drone coming over your fence line right now. Here's where the drone is going. Here's where the operator is going, and, letting them take action and actually giving them those alerts in real time. The second bucket is the historical data, which is really more of the investigative or sort of intelligence piece of being able to dig into the large scale data and say, okay, well, where have we seen this drone before? Where did it come from? Potentially, whose drone is it? And then the third piece is that forensic side, providing kind of the hands-on of a drone after an incident and, being able to tie it all together.
I read that in Canada, SkySafe is a leading provider of drone forensic solutions.
On drone forensics, we're the primary provider in most countries. We are integrating some of our forensics stuff in the cloud with a few of the major digital forensics platforms so that they can use that as an API to be able to use that data. But no, we're really one of the only teams in this space who focuses on the forensic side. I think that comes from kind of our background. Many of the folks on our team, come from a digital forensics background or a, reverse engineering or hardware exploitation kind of background. So, that was kind of a thing that we fell kind of naturally into.
What do you see as the challenges today in the counter UAS industry?
There's certainly challenges kind of everywhere across the board, I would say. I think one of the hardest parts is really from the customer side. For a lot of these customers, the drone problem is a totally new problem for them. And it's really difficult. It's complicated. The technologies involved are also difficult and complicated. And it's a totally new threat for them. It's a totally new problem space. So I think that's why, I talked about a lot of our job is kind of being that trusted partner, is kind of educating them and helping to train and educate their staff around, hey, what are the capabilities of these drones? What drones exist? What do they do? What are the technologies? Because it's, frankly, it's hard. And I sympathize with them, from their direction of being kind of thrown into this space of, really difficult threats. In my time as an Air Force officer, we saw pretty early on the sorts of threats of, small and, low cost drones on the battlefield. And there's a lot of different types of organizations that are now kind of being faced with that threat domestically that, maybe had never thought about it before. It's tricky. And then, you talked about a little bit on the regulatory side, the regulatory landscape on the counter drone and drone tracking world are still developing. And the rules in just the drone space as a whole are still developing. The FAA is still working on, various initiatives in the commercial drone space and in counter UAS, which actually is, pretty important. There's a lot of initiatives going on right now. The FAA is just about to start up its counter UAS ARC, Aviation Rulemaking Committee, of which SkySafe is a member participating in that. So I think, being able to get everyone in industry and government on the same page and, working together and kind of building out, okay, what do the requirements need to be for these things, both for effectiveness, but also to make sure that all of these different technologies can be used safely. It's super important, and making sure, as you kind of hinted at earlier, that there are standards for communication between these systems so that everyone can benefit from and utilize the data. All of that is super important. I think as much as folks from the industry can complain and grumble a little bit here and there about how slow things are moving, it's a hard problem and it takes a lot of work. And we have to make sure that kind of all the players involved have a seat at the table and that everyone's being listened to and that we really come up with the right solutions for all these things.
How would you characterize the willingness of asset managers to take on some level of protection for drone incursions?
Like most things in security, it's not a problem until it's really a problem. So security at some level, no matter what you're talking about, right? Whether you're talking about physical security or public safety or cybersecurity, it's always going to be some level of reactionary. It's always going to be, a major issue happens, a major incident happens, and everybody kind of reacts. It's hard to avoid that in the security world. For the folks in the various industries who have seen major incidents, airports and prisons included, it's a real problem to them. Depending on who you talk to, some of them say it's their number one problem. And I think that's not just because of the level of kind of scope and risk, but also the level of just difficulty and challenge. It's not something that they can just easily, buy a few pieces of hardware off the shelf and plug them in and, say that you've solved the problem. It takes a lot of work. It takes work and training, education. So I think there's certainly a willingness and a need there to be actually solving the problem, because they see it all the time now.
In addition to protecting fixed assets, can you protect special events or one-time engagements, say like a big festival?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that, this model of really trying to build out large scale drone tracking infrastructure, that's something that it's, suited perfectly for, because we don't need to be setting up individual new unique hardware for any temporary event. The idea is we've already got coverage. We've already got coverage over those areas, and it's just a matter of providing that data and those alerts and that coverage and responsiveness for that particular event.
How does having the cloud platform benefit your clients?
Number one, it's ease of use, right? It's ease of use and ease of deployment. It means that they're not thinking about it as hardware that they need to deploy and maintain and train on and understand and potentially, fix or replace and figure out kind of optimal placement of systems. It really just means, you've got a web interface and you subscribe to it like you'd subscribe to any other service. It means that all of the kind of training of personnel is, really focused on just, okay, how do we use this? What are the features? How do we get alerts? How do we make sure that we have the right people who are able to have eyes on that and who are able to get notified in that chain when something really is happening? The other thing too is that similar to a cell network provider, one of the advantages is that SkySafe is the one that really manages and maintains that entire network of sensors. It means if we have, a sensor that goes down or we need to upgrade something, we're doing that immediately, generally invisible to the customer. We're the ones who are in charge of, maintaining and upgrading and adding new capabilities to that network over time. And just like the direction that, much of the world has gone on cloud-based software, one of the advantages that customers get is that they're always using the most advanced technology. They're always using the most up-to-date capabilities. We're not trying to go and sell them a new fancy box that next year. They know that anytime we add new capabilities or features or functionality, we're rolling that out to our entire network immediately. So I think that's huge. They know that they are getting the top level of protection, the top level of data, the top level of awareness all the time. There's never any question.
Does your service map resemble a cell phone carrier 5G coverage map? The ones we see in the TV ads?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And in the same way, we can basically show like, hey, here's the coverage area that we cover right now. Here's the coverage area of where we're building out into the future. And we can, prioritize those coverage area build outs depending on our customers' needs, depending on kind of who the top priority folks are and where their coverage is. So that's exactly it. And I think that's, the right way to think about it is instead of thinking about everything as these kind of, point solutions, these kind of tactical solutions, it's really thinking about, what do we need to manage the airspace as a whole, and then building out the coverage to do that.
So really, a customer within your service area can sign up for the counter drone service, much like they were subscribing to a phone service.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just doing a contract, subscribing to the service. And then, the other piece is us, being able to provide all of the training and education to them and really supporting them. To me, that's a super valuable piece of this is our relationship with our customers, as partners. Like I want to know exactly what they're seeing in the real world. I want to know, what concerns they have, what threats they're seeing, what features are critical to them, so that we can roll those out. As far as, companies in this space, I think one of the ways we've sort of differentiated ourselves is, we see ourselves as a true partner to the organizations that we work with. We're in there, we're educating them, and we're trying to, really build what they need. I think we're exceptionally good at that, on our team.
After a customer makes a request for service, what happens next?
Generally, we'll go and we'll be able to kind of demonstrate and show them what data we have, both of their area already and other kind of similar analogous coverage areas, different customer types, different organizations. The first big thing to me is really digging in with them and understanding what their use case is and what the threats are that they're worried about and what their needs are. And like I said, it's completely fine with me if we dig in and we figure out what their needs are and we say, hey, actually, we can't solve those needs for you. I'm happy to have that conversation. And I think that's why it's about kind of building that trust and then kind of directing them to who we think can solve those problems.
Does the customer have the ability to monitor or watch what's happening around their facility in real time?
That's exactly it. So they're going to see in their security operations center or kind of however they're structured, they're going to see the map around their facility and they're going to see the real-time information about any drones that are in their airspace, that are in that immediate area. And they're also going to get alerts. We define alert regions around that facility. So we can, define basically a warning level for them where if a drone comes within a certain distance, they essentially get a warning to say like, hey, there's a drone in this area. You may want to pay attention to that. And then when a drone actually physically crosses into their facility, that's when we really give them kind of the full alerting their whole chain of, who needs to respond. And making sure they have the information about, where that drone is and potentially where that operator is to be able to, dispatch police, security, what have you, to go take care of the situation.
How did you get started in the drone industry?
We started SkySafe kind of end of 2015, beginning of 2016. We got started in it. I had my background from the Air Force doing small UAV work in the Air Force Research Lab. But then a lot of our other folks and my co-founders, had been involved in various cybersecurity and hardware sorts of things. So, for us, it was pretty natural. We kind of came from the security and defense side and, we all had drone experience and security experience. And we kind of saw the rising drone threat with all of these commercial and consumer drones kind of popping up everywhere.
Was there an aha moment when you got the idea for the company?
Before SkySafe, my co-founders and I, we were running a small security company doing basically cybersecurity and reverse engineering and vulnerability analysis and kind of hardware exploitation stuff. And, we saw our area of expertise overlapped really well with this. And we kind of saw this threat and we thought, wow, we could really make a difference in this space. We could really apply our skills, against this in an area that really needs it. That was kind of the genesis of it.
What have the past few years taught you about the drone industry?
I think the drone industry in some ways moves very fast and in some ways moves very slow. The very fast aspect is the technology progresses very quickly. Just the level of capability of drones that we've seen, the amount of it over the last, call it 5 years, is insane. It's huge. I think it's easy to forget just what drones were even like to fly in that kind of 2015, 2016 timeframe. They were really not that much more advanced than kind of traditional RC planes and RC helicopters. They were, pretty difficult to fly. As a drone pilot, you were doing things manually. You were really, throttling up, throttling down, tilting everything and pitch and roll and whatnot. But now I think the big change over these few years has been more and more integration of sensors and different sensor types directly into the drones and using those with their flight control systems to be able to, for the drone to do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as control systems, being stable in one place in the air, doing obstacle avoidance, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's incredible. And the funny thing is, as a counter drone company, we own a lot of drones. I mean, we try to buy every single drone on the market. We have a fleet of drones that is, I think, nearing about 500 drones in our collection at the moment. So we have just racks and racks and racks of drones. I think we have kind of a relatively unique view in the space of, how drone technology has evolved because we've literally owned and flown nearly all of them. The difference between flying a drone that was built in 2016 versus flying a drone built in 2023, it's night and day. It's amazing. especially when you talk about some of the more advanced capabilities that have come along in the last couple of years in direct like autonomy and machine vision. I think the real leader in that space is Skydio. I mean, if anybody has used any of Skydio's products with their ability to, follow someone doing action sports or cars or whatever, it's magic. It's truly magic. It's truly incredible. And, that's only happened because we've had the ability to integrate large numbers of cameras and sensors and the video processing and machine vision technology to do all of that on board the drone. It's huge. And it's super cool and super fun.
What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs?
Like anything, it's about kind of finding the problem space that you're uniquely able to contribute to and something that you're passionate about. I think everybody at our company is, they're here at SkySafe because they're really passionate about the mission. They're excited about drones and they're excited about the future that it can provide. And I think that really shows. What we work on is really difficult. It's really challenging, but it's that passion for it that actually makes it worth it and makes people, keep coming to work every day.
What do you credit the early successes of the company?
There were a lot of things early on. DoD has made a lot of headway in the last few years on trying to, figure out how to, interact with startups and really try to connect, new technology to Department of Defense, to all the services. That was really a big help for us early on, was to be able to try to utilize that and try to, have those direct connections with those customers, for whom this is really important.
And for my final question, Grant, what message would you like to leave regarding the future of the drone industry?
The future of the drone industry is bright and it's exciting. And I think as industries go, I think one of the things that's been really heartening to me has been that I think everyone in the industry is really kind of on the same page and pulling in the same direction. I think everyone, whether it's drone manufacturers or drone service providers or airspace management companies, or even, law enforcement and government and legislation, I think everyone sees the potential and everyone's excited about all of the great things that drones can do. And everyone wants to get us there, and I think we're all kind of each doing our individual part to build out what becomes that eventual ecosystem of drone use and being able to use drones for good. To me, that's super exciting.
That's it for episode 402 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Grant Jordan of SkySafe. I want to thank Grant for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about SkySafe or want to connect with Grant, check out the webpage at skysafe.io. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.